Alafia and welcome. This is Nkechi Taifa, civil and human rights attorney, scholar activist, freedom fighter, and bestseller author. This is Human Rights and Justice, my thought-provoking talk show featuring kick-ass commentary and stimulating guests. We discuss domestic and global themes, highlighting political, economic, and social rights. Get up and stand up with me, Nkechi Taifa, for human rights and justice.
We declare our rank on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
Which we tend to bring into existence by any means necessary. Yes, indeed. I always love the words of our great shining prince, Malcolm X. Hajj Malik Shabazz. Welcome to the 62nd episode of Human Rights and Justice with your host, Nkechi Taifa. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am with the guest that we have coming on today and the topic that we're going to be discussing. You all know I'm all about reparations. The topic is the ethics of reparations and resistance, engaging the concept, the commitment, and the struggle. And who is going to elucidate all this for us? None other than the great, the phenomenal, the fabulous Saber, Dr. Maulana Karenga. We're talking about someone who is professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at the California State University, Long Beach. But we all know him, at least those who have been around for a while ought to know him as the creator of the Pan-African cultural holiday Kwanzaa and the Nguso Sabo Umoja Kuchitaji Galio Ujimu Ujimania Kumba Imani. I can do it by heart because I've been saying it for the past 50-so years. The 7 principles, as well as author of the authoritative text titled Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture. An activist scholar, he's chair of the organization US and the National Association of Kawaida Organizations and executive director of the African American Cultural Center and the Kawaida Institute of Pan-African Studies, and also co-chair of the Black Community, Clergy, and Labor Alliance, BCCLA. Many of you may not know this as well, because besides Kwanzaa, Dr. Karenga is the author of numerous scholarly articles and books, including essays on struggle, position and analysis, kawaida, and questions of life and struggle, ma'at, the moral ideal in ancient Egypt, a study in classical African ethics, Introduction to Black Studies, 4th edition, Husia, Sacred Wisdom of Ancient Egypt, and the Odu Ifa, the ethical teachings, and the Odu Ifa I'm in the process of going through right now. What you might not also know is that Dr. Karenga is currently writing a major work on the social and ethical philosophy of Malcolm X entitled The Liberation Ethics of Malcolm X, Critical Consciousness, Moral Grounding, and Transformative Struggle. He is the recipient of numerous awards for scholarship, leadership, and service, including the Paul Robeson Zora Neale Hurston Award for Scholarly Work of African World Culture and the C.L.R. James Award for Outstanding Publication of Scholarly Works that advance the discipline of Africana and Black Studies, and the Presidential Award for Exemplary Service and Outstanding Contribution to the Field of Black Studies, all from the National Council for Black Studies. And he is also the subject of the book by Dr. Molefi Asante entitled Maulana Karenga, an intellectual portrait. And with that, I want to bring to Human Rights and Justice talk show none other than Saber, Dr. Maulana Karenga. Jambo Habarigani, my brother.
Habarigani, Attorney Nkechi, it's so good to be on your program. Thanks so much for this honor and invitation. An opportunity to discuss what's one of the most foremost authorities in reparations and one of the foremost advocates, activists for reparations, you yourself, Attorney Nkechi.
Well,
That's what
my
I
brother,
appreciate.
thank you so very much for that. But I just want to know that I really sat at the feet of Queen Mother Audley Moore. I sat at the feet
Yes.
of Dr. Imari Abubakari Obadeli, and I would never forget the wonderful, it wasn't a eulogy, but article, whatever it was that you wrote upon the passing of Dr. Obadeli. And, it just really warmed my heart because many of these teachings, many of the things that you've done since founding Kwanzaa is just so very astounding and worldwide. And those are some of the things that Imari Obadeli meant to me. But also, before we get
He
into
meant a
me,
lot to us all. He was
talk
very
to me about that.
important in terms of standing up. And a lot of things people don't know. I was one of the founding members of the Republic of New Africa. I was the first Minister of Culture. Later, Baraka, Amir Baraka was also one. And Osajiman was also. So the three of us were the Minister of Culture. And I gave him and Gaidi their names.
Oh my
His
goodness.
brother, Gaidi, it was European name Milton, and then his name, Imada. His name was Imada, but it's Ebonics, he changed to Imadi, but it means strength, right? And that was him, living an embodiment of strength for us as a people.
Wow.
A
You
warrior
taught
who
me
would not
something.
sit down until the struggle was won. That's so beautiful. Wouldn't walk away from the battlefield until the struggle was won, all the way to the end of his life struggling. And it was beautiful to work with him at various points.
So, yeah, I do remember there was a triumvirate of ministers of culture. And you were, in fact, one of them, but I did not know that you were the one who gave the famous Henry brothers, Richard Henry and
Milton.
Milton Henry, right?
He was
Their names,
always with
Amari
Malcolm.
and
Yeah.
Gaidi.
He was always with Haji Malcolm X, Milton, he
Yes.
traveled with him and documented, his travels.
Wow. Well, I'm quite honored to have you join us today to talk about this issue, and it has been entitled The Ethics of Reparations and Resistance, Engaging the Concept, the Commitment, and the Struggle. So tell us about that that title and just what you want to share with us along that theme.
People, I think it's very important to understand that rightly defined, the struggle for reparations is an ethical struggle. And the struggle has two aspects to it: affirmative and oppositional. Affirming our own expansive humanity, our soulfulness, our sacredness, our right to life, our right to flourish and come into the fullness of ourselves, and also to oppose those forces that would deny us that. So that's the ethics of it. And so when we talk about the ethics of reparation and resistance, we're talking about these things. One, reparations means first, justice for a people. Second, accountability from the oppressor. Third, an ethical model for the world of how they should treat a grossly and grievously injured people. And finally, what we said when we use the word reparation itself, it's a healing, a repairing, a renewing, and remaking ourselves in the process and practice of repairing, renewing, and remaking the world that wounded us, right? We have to, in fact, clear free space for ourselves. We have to clear the basis for our health and our wholeness, right? We live in a pathology of oppression, right? And we must, in fact, change the society, which is not only pathological, that is sick, but also pathogenic. That is, it's not only sick itself, but it generates sickness by its very structure and functioning. And that at the heart of that is racism and capitalism, sexism, all the other isms that deny and put constraints and limits on human freedom, human dignity, and our right to live lives of flourishing. And of course, as we always say, come into the fullness of ourselves.
Wow. You talked about justice, you talked about accountability, you talked about healing, you talked about repair. All of those items, those elements are so very essential to what we're talking about and to our understanding of the concept of reparations. What about resistance? Where does that fit into this schemata of repair.
Right. So again, resistance has two major points: affirmation, resisting attacks on our very dignity and personhood, on our rights, right? But affirming ourselves in the process, right? Because sometimes when we think resistance here is used as a synonym for struggle, and struggle for me, I use that most often. And I talk about the need for righteous and relentless struggle. Righteous is, again, ethically grounded. We're always concerned about that. If we look at the world today, we see people masquerading as doing moral things like calling for self-defense, but actually waging genocidal war. So we want to make sure our oppressor does not become our teacher, right? And even our allies can't be our tutor. We must speak our own special culture truth. We must say what is real to us. We must reaffirm our own sacredness, our own soulfulness, our own resilience and resourcefulness, right? That's what we have to do in affirmation. But we have to, again, as I said, resist all forces that would deny us this dignity, deny us this freedom, deny us the good life all humans ought to have. And so that's what the resistance is. And again, because we're in a pathological and pathogenic society, we have to clear this society so that we can live healthy lives, lives of wholeness and meaning, right? And flourishing lives. We say that in the context of oppression, there's no reliable remedy except resistance, no strategy worthy of its name that does not privilege and promote struggle. And there's no way forward except in struggle across the battlefield for a new world.
So I know that Henry Highland Garnett always used to say, let our motto be resistance, resistance, resistance. And I know in some of your writings, you've quoted Nana Amilcar Cabral.
Yeah.
His famous quote, tell no lies, claim no easy victories.
Right.
And to expound on that just a little bit with respect to what some of the issues that we're confronting with now with respect to reparations, some of the misconceptions that are out there or issues in the field, or I mean, it's not just all hunky-dory, you know, we're going to just have it today and you know, there it is. But what are some of the issues that we are faced with right now?
Right. And so again, I thank you for bringing up Nana Amilcar Cabral, who said, mask no difficulties, tell no lies, and claim no easy victory. So you're right. There are difficulties in achieving reparations, right? Mask no difficulty, tell no lie. Don't lie about how difficult it is, about what it takes. And then finally, mask no difficulties, tell no lies, and claim no easy victories. We're going to have victories. We got to recognize it. Because one of the things that Black conscious people do is they deny their own victories, right? But they don't recognize their victories. And they're always saying, a lot of times they'll be saying, oh, we haven't done anything. We're about far back. Don't say that. Too many people have given their lives, the wholeness of their lives, to push us forward. And we have come forward, right? And we have to respect that. So it's about struggle. So if you look at the title for our conversation today, the ethics of reparation and resistance, the concept, the commitment, and the struggle. These are the three aspects of it. First of all, we got to know what it is. Second, we got to embrace it, commit ourselves to it. And third, we've got to struggle for it because they're not going to give it to us. Even when it looks like they're giving to it, they're piecemealing us to death. The university gives one, the city gives one, the state gives one, but the real reparations is denied us. And that has to come, as we're going to say in a minute, from the federal government itself, right? So I think that the first thing we have to do is ask, what is reparation? What are we looking for in reparations, right? And then second, how much are we willing to sacrifice to achieve it? And how much we're willing to give ourselves to the struggle necessary to achieve it. So for us, there are several fundamental aspects of achieving and actually defining reparations as we achieve it. So regardless of what we talk about, I want us to see reparations as having in its definition 4 basic aspects. It is above all a justice for a people. Second, accountability from the oppressor. And third, an ethical model for the world, how to treat a grossly and grievously injured people. And finally, it's a process of healing, repairing, and renewing ourselves in the process and practice of repairing, renewing, and remaking the world. So it's a process of us healing, repairing, and renewing and remaking ourselves in the process and practice of repairing, renewing, and remaking the world. And there are several steps to that. The first step has to be a public and communal dialogue so that we can have an idea of what it is. It looks like it's easy, and people really think they already know what reparations is, but we don't have a common understanding of it. And that's why we need a communal dialogue about it. At the same time, we're having a public dialogue. And once we get that internal dialogue, which is ongoing, then we can make a stronger case for what it is. That's how people do the piecemealing. Everybody said they're doing the reparations, but are they repairing? Or are they reducing reparations to money? And I'm going to give several things that reparations must involve, and money is simply just one of them, and one among fundamental ways of compensation. Money itself is a form of compensation, but what are the other compensations? We'll talk about that. So first we have to have the communal and public dialogue. The communal, so we can know what we are fighting for and be clear and come to some working consensus, some operational unity. Unity, as I defined it when I first introduced the concept, operational unity, I said unity in diversity, unity without uniformity, unity in principle, purpose, and practice. I repeat, unity in principle, purpose, and practice. We don't all have to believe everything, but we need a basis from which we work, right? And so we need that. And then at the same time, this dialogue has to take a public dimension. And the public dimension must confront white people with the awesome Holocaust that they have imposed on us and the continuing oppression they have of us, right? So we have to define the the injury I'm talking about. And the injury has 3 basic aspects to it. That's another way of approaching. You see how full the conversation is. You can't say one thing and that's it. So now I'm going to go into the different aspects of the injury. The different aspects of the injury. What is the fundamental injury? What is the root injury? Because when we talk about repairing, we're talking about repairing an injury, right? And so the fundamental injury is the Holocaust of enslavement. That's the first thing. Second, the savagery of segregation. And third, ongoing systemic racism. Those are the 3 interrelated injuries. And we cannot forget the first one, which is the root one, the Holocaust of enslavement, which led to all the subsequent ones, right? And so this Holocaust, why am I saying Holocaust? Usually you associate that with the Jews, but the Jews have 2-3 words like we do have for Holocaust. Holocaust is the English word, so anybody could use it, right? Right? But we use it because it's the most morally definitive word for an act of morally monstrous genocide that is not only against the targeted people, but also a crime against humanity.
Absolutely.
Right? And it must be called what it is. And a lot of times people don't want to call it that, but that's what it is. And you know, the larger the injury and the more severe the injury, the greater the repair is needed.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes,
whether
indeed.
that is compensation or all these other things I'm going to talk about. So I think it's very important, whether it's money, or all the other things you can compensate. And so in our organization, the African American Culture Center, us, we say in Swahili, maangamizi.
Say it again.
Maangamizi. Maangamizi.
My tongue is colonized. I want to get it right. Maangamizi.
Mizi. Maangamizi.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Maangamizi is taken from the word angamiza. Angamiza. And so when you turn it into a noun, it becomes Maangamizi, but the MA is also amplitive. That means it's great. So it means a great destruction. Now, most people wonder why would I use that? First, the people that want to have a monopoly on the word Holocaust, but some Black people might say, well, what about Ma'afa? And I'm saying people can use that because Jews have 3 words for their Holocaust. Shoah, which is Hebrew, Chobam, which is Hebrew but come from Yiddish, and then Holocaust, right? So, and we have 3. We have Mangamizi, we have Ma'afa, and then we have Holocaust, right? So,
and we also don't want to forget about what you said before, genocide. That's
right. So Holocaust is a genocide, but it's a morally monstrous genocide. It's the worst, morally worst genocide, as if there can be levels of genocide, but it's meant to say it's morally monstrous. It's like frighteningly and vulgarly wrong, right? The killing of people and killing of them both physically and culturally. Because if you kill people culturally, you already erased them. That's what's happening in the world now. People are killing the culture of the people and then therefore making them not exist anymore, right? So, and this is one of the things that they were trying to do with us. So anyhow, let me just go back to Maangamizi. So Maangamizi means intentional destruction. And you know, both in morality and in law, intentionality is key. With Ma'afa, it just means an accident or catastrophe. And it could be a natural accident, a natural catastrophe, because it doesn't show intentionality. But Angamiza means to destroy. So destruction, when you take it from the verb Angamiza, which means to destroy, and then you turn it into Mangamizi, means intentional great destruction. That's what we want to hold to. And so that's why we use that. And of course, you know, I've been teaching Swahili since the 60s, right? And so a lot of times I ask Black people, let's talk before you choose something so we can have a discussion about it. But a lot of times people that start, they might not be grounded in the language, but they'll start talking it. And one of the things we've got to do is do more dialogue, right? And dialogue with people that are experts in various ways. So if I want to know something legally, I mean, I haven't been to law school. I got to ask you. I mean, I can read something that somebody said, but I don't know if it's right until I talk with my community and with the experts in my community. Rescue me if I'm wrong. That's what we have to do. That's why the dialogue, the community dialogue is so important here. So we're talking about a morally monstrous act of genocide, Mangimizi, a morally monstrous act of genocide that is not only against the people themselves, but a crime against humanity. And it's intentional. And it expresses itself in 3 basic ways. 1, the morally monstrous destruction of human life. We don't even know how many these people kill, but we know it's in the millions. We know it's more than 6 million, right? And I'm telling you that if, you know, the destruction of 1 human life is a tragedy. How much more is millions and tens of millions of people, right? The second thing is it means a morally monstrous destruction of human culture. The destructions of cities, towns, empires, states, right? Villages, great works of art and literature and music and the people who made them, right?
Language and religion and
that's the destruction of all of that, right? That's why we have to talk about this, right? Right? And then finally, the moral monstrous act of the destruction of human possibility, lifting us out of our own history and culture and making us a footnote and forgotten casualty in theirs, right? Erasing our memory, opening up our mind, emptying it and pouring the trash of their conceptions of life into us. Right?
And now today, banning books so that we can't even teach about the true history and culture.
That's right. And you can tell they're guilty because that's what they want to do. They want to keep us from the truth. And we don't ever give up wokeism or woke being woke. Ism is their thing, but our thing is woke, right? And Haji Malcolm said, you got 3 processes for coming into your own. You got to wake up, you got to clean up, and then you got to stand up. Wake up is coming into critical consciousness. Cleaning up is to get moral grounded, speaking truth, doing justice, caring for each other, right? And then standing up is standing up in struggle to advance and expand the realm of human freedom and justice in this world. That's what we've got to do. That's our destiny. As Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune said, we're world-encompassing people, and our task is to remake the world. It is nothing less than this. And we have to think like that, because sometimes the European wants us to think just ghetto. They want us to be an ant that thinks a coconut shell, the water in a coconut shell is an ocean. There's a proverb that says water in a coconut shell seems like an ocean to an ant. But we're not ants. And the world is not a coconut shell with water in it. The world is where we belong, and we have an obligation to make sure it's in the ever-expanding realm of human freedom and justice. That's our task.
That is our task. And Nana, you started out talking about this dialogue, and then you talked about the Holocaust, the Menga Lisi, and I know that there were some other elements to the concept of reparations as espoused by Kawaii. So we have the dialogue, we have the public admission. What comes next?
Okay. So first, once we have the dialogue, then we have to admit, public admission. We have to admit that it's Holocaust. See, one of the things that white people do, they begin to develop the definition for things, right? So they don't let us say what things are. They tell us what things are, right? And if whoever defines first, they shape how you approach it. We say one of the greatest powers in the world is the power to define reality and make others accept it, even when it's to their disadvantage and contributes to their own oppression and the oppression of others. And so what they try to do is to set up the discussion themselves, and they tell us how to relate to the Holocaust and how to, in fact, relate to how we call it. And so we've got to have them to admit, I don't want the white man to apologize to me for slavery as if it's natural, or slave trade as if it's business gone bad with collateral damage, right? It's more than collateral damage. It's intentional damage. It is great intentional injury, death, right? It's Holocaust. So I need them to say that before they apologize. And if they can't admit that it is a morally monstrous act of genocide, right? Along with the second one, that the savagery of segregation was a continuation of that, and that the systemic racism was also an extension of that. So that's what they must admit. Once they admit that, public admission, then guess what? We can have public apology. And who should apologize? See, we got to talk about that. Who should apologize? The national government, what we call the state. Why? Because they legalized it, right?
It was in the Constitution.
That's right. But they legalized it even in state legislatures. They legalized it and made people permanent in ways that the discussion didn't even, the Constitution didn't even discuss. They put it into practice in the states, and the U.S. government protected it, right? And the U.S. government then made laws to keep people from what they call escaping. George Washington put into place the first so-called fugitive slave law, made it illegal to help someone to freedom. What kind of country that claims they're a freedom country and a democracy would do that, right? That's why they don't want to hear this history we have, right? And so what we need to do is to make sure that the federal government, and that's why I say it's not enough for a university to do it. It's not enough for cities to do it or for states to do it. The federal government must do it. It made the law, it legalized it. It protected it with army and navy and militia, right? And so it has to apologize, okay? Then we move from that to public recognition. We need ways to remember this and to teach the meaning of this, not only to us, but to this country and to the world.
So what are some of those methods? What are some of those forms of
need to,
memory
yes,
recognition?
thanks for that. They need to first build monuments that reaffirm the dignity and the sacredness of our lives and the lessons learned from this. And they must teach it in every venue possible, in the media, in grade school, in colleges, and in universities. The horror and meaning of this, again, not only to us, the victim, but also to this country, the victimizer, and all the other people that participated in it, as well as to the world, right? What does it mean to have done this to a people and to continue to oppress them and to deny our Holocaust? They're the Holocaust deniers, they're the genocide deniers, and they're doing it even today, right? And then the next thing we need, and finally we get to this, compensation, right? That's what Black people say. Give me my check. That's what they want. Give me my check. Okay, you can get your check. But guess what? Compensation is more than that. What about our land? Free health care, free education, right? There's so many other ways. That's why we go back to the need for a communal dialogue so we can talk. Some people don't need reparations, so you don't give it to them individually. Oprah, I don't think needs reparation in terms of money. She does need reparations in terms of the conditions that are created, right? But not for compensation. Also, we've got to solve this problem of who gets it, right? Because they're dividing us along that. There's a place in here we got to show credentials and things. Many Black people don't even have all that, right? They know where they came from, but they don't. That we got to solve that. And when we're pushed by the dominant society, it's pushed to divide us and to delay the reparations that we require. So we've got to come to terms with what kind of compensation and how we deliver that compensation. And I'm going to take the stand right now. Wherever we do it, it has to be a collective project. It can't just be individual. It has to be collective. Some people we have to get some money in people's hands, right? I'm not going to deny that because we're hurting, right? But we have to have collective projects that go beyond individual short-term acquisitions. There's a long-term project here, and we have to ensure our future. We have to ensure our future. And then, of course, we go from that to developing preventive measures, right? The 6th point here is preventive measures. That's why we've got to link this struggle to the overall liberation struggle, right? Because what we have to do is put together structures, process, institutions that prevent the occurrence of this. People think, oh, we would never have this in America. But if you look at the fastest conversations going on now, and Trump is just he's just a visible moral monster side of America. But they supported him. 70 million people supported him, right?
Yeah, that's scary. I'm sorry, that's very scary.
Pardon me?
I just said that's very scary. That 70 million people supported him and still support him. Yeah.
That's right. And that's not all of them, because we're seeing where they come from right now. They can't even mention Palestinian people's name, even though they're being killed mercilessly. Just think about that. And they never talk about Haiti. They don't talk about the Uyghurs or the Rohingya. They got racial conversation. If it's white people, then they want to take our money and pay for their bloodletting or to protect them, right? But my argument is that nobody deserves a compensation and recognition and respect more than we. Everybody should have respect. But I'm telling you this, I've said this before, if we're ever going to make a great society out of this society, right, then we can never pass up the Native Americans' legitimate claim. This will never be a great society until we come to terms with the legitimate claims of the Native Americans on this society. Now, the white man tries to say, oh, enslavement was, the Holocaust of enslavement was the original sin. No, it was Native Americans. They fought hundreds of years before we got here, right? So let's be honest with that, right? We don't have to take anything from them to reaffirm our role, right? Our role is here, right? And I see that as divisive, and I see that as denying another people's history and Holocaust and genocide. And when we don't need to do that, in fact, we ought to find allies because, in fact, the Native Americans were our first allies in this struggle, right? Absolutely. And so I think that we need to, that doesn't mean everybody liked us, because black people, a lot of times, they want everybody just like them and hug them. No, sometimes they don't get to do that, right? What we've got to do is hug each other, and we've got to stand strong, and we've got to take the moral ground, right? We don't need, sometimes people say, when they do wrong, you take the high ground. We're already on the high ground. The oppressor's on the low ground. That's the problem. Sometimes people give the oppressor greater moral status than they do oppressed. And that cannot happen, right? So we have to build this structure. That means changing, radically reconstructing, radically reimagining and reconstructing this country so that there is a real freedom, a real justice, a shared good for everybody. And finally, of course, guess what?
What's that?
We've got to struggle. That's the seventh fundamental, righteous and relentless struggle. Righteous and relentless struggle is the seventh and final aspect, I think, of reparations. When I think about it, we must struggle. And that means that we got to struggle, not just in confronting the white man, but we have to struggle with ourselves and struggle with that which they've made in us. That's why Nana Fanon says, the revolution, the liberation struggle succeeds to the precise degree that each person irreversibly begins a liberation process within himself. And what does that mean, Nana Cabral said? It is a struggle against our weakness. That's what struggle is, turning our weaknesses into strength, right? And what is those weaknesses? They're rooted in society, how it redefines our humanity, how it constrains our life, how it fires us and denies us economic gain, it denies us our own special culture truth, denies us a quality education, denies us quality housing and health care, right? So we have to struggle against that, but we have to be constant soldiers, never unready, as the Odu Ifa said, for constant soldiers, never unready, not even one. And we've got to be always ready to struggle. We've got
to be always ready. And we are listening to Dr. Maulana Karenga. We are listening to the professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at California State University, Long Beach. We're talking to the person who is the creator of the Pan-African cultural holiday, Kwanzaa, and the Nguzo Saba, and so much more. We're talking about someone who is the author of many scholarly books and authors, and we're talking with him today, dealing with the ethics of reparations and resistance, engaging the concept, the commitment, and the struggle. This is Nkechi Taifa, the host of Human Rights and Justice, a talk show. And Dr. Karenga, when we left off, we were talking about struggle, and just reminds me of Nana Frederick Douglass, who says, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Right. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation, or those who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the waters without the awful roar of his waters, and they want the thunder without the lightning and all like that. But he said this struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it's got to be a struggle. Because what? Because power
concedes nothing not to man. It never did. And it never will.
You said it.
What I wanted to say is agency is important here, right? Agency is important. That is us acting in our own interest. Kujichagilia, to define ourselves, right? To name ourselves, to create for ourselves, to speak for ourselves, to create free space for ourselves, to reach within ourselves and create the world we want and deserve to live in. And that means when we talk about reparations, I want to introduce a concept I developed out of the ancient Egyptian ethical teachings called Suruj Ta, which means to heal, repair, renew, and remake the world in the process and practice of repairing, renewing, and remaking ourselves, and vice versa. And here I want to introduce the concept of the injured physician.
Okay.
Now, there's two concepts of that. The injured physician. So we don't ever deny our wound. We never deny injury, right? But we've got to take agency and believe and know we have the knowledge and capacity together to heal ourselves, right? What does it Seruj Tai mean in Kawida Mat? It means to repair what is damaged, to raise up what is in ruins, right? To rejoin what is disunited or separated, right? To replenish what is depleted, to set right what is wrong, to strengthen what is weakened, and to make flourish that which is fragile and undeveloped. That's what we've got to do, not only in our relationships, repairing them, raising them up, right? Setting them back right? Strengthening them when they're fragile. We must do that in our relationship with the world, with the environment, with other people, but with the world, because we got to build a good world we want and deserve to live in and leave as a legacy to future generations worthy of the name in History African, a legacy worthy of the name in History African. That's what we want to do. We want to leave. Yeah.
So this concept of, I forgot what, Saruj
Tai.
The injured physician, self-healing. This is all part of what should be part of our culture, right? And our people's self-healing and recovery process, the whole people.
Yes.
Expound on that just a little bit more, because I think that this is really, really essential to the whole concept of reparations, because we need this internal repair.
That's right. So we have to struggle with ourselves and against our oppressor. Struggle with ourselves and against our oppressor. Against that in us, which is in contradiction to the choice we made for freedom and justice. And the European has put so much in our mind. That's why in the 60s, I stood up and said, I'm a Kawida revolutionary culture nationalist. See, people used to try to put culture national down. There's a revolutionary national, there's a culture national, as if we are not revolutionary too. Everybody in the 60s claimed to be revolutionary, right? Second, we were on every list of the FBI that any other group, including the Panthers, were on. I just want you to know that, right? And we stayed on that longer than other groups that I know. So I think it's very important for us to realize that when we say culture, we're not talking about song and dance. We're talking about the totality of thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates, sustains, and develops itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. So culture to us is everything. It is history, it is religion, it is ethics, it is social organization, economic organization, political organization, creative production, which is your art, your music, your literature, your dance, etc. And this ethos, the collective psychology we achieve as a result of practice in the other 6 areas. So we said culture is everything, right? In fact, Nana Cabral and Nana Sekou Touré said that the struggle itself, the national liberation struggle, is an act of culture. And why is that said? We said in the quote above, culture is the basis for both recovery and revolution. If we don't recover from what they've done to us, we can't make the revolution. We say, look, the battle we're fighting is a battle to win the hearts and minds of our people. If we lose that battle, we can't win anything else. If we can't imagine reform, how do we make revolution? So we said, here, let me tell you what Kawida revolutionary culture nationalism, based on 3 principles. And they remain here, right? And they are rooted in the teachings of Nana's Fanon, Haji Malcolm, Haji Sekou Touré, Haji Amilcar Cabral, Nana, Dr. Mary McCarthy, Dr. Anna Judith Cooper, etc. So here's the 3 fundamental principles. One, that for Kawida revolutionary culture nationalism. The first is that the defining feature of any people or nation is its culture. That for a people to be itself and free itself, it must be self-conscious, self-determining, and rooted in its own culture. And third, that the quality of life of a people and the success of its liberation struggle depends upon it waging cultural revolution within and political revolution without, resulting in a radical transformation of self, society, and ultimately the world. And one of the things that divides us from other people is that they talk about changing society, but they haven't changed themselves. And they talk as if with the new world, we become new people. We'll come, as Nana Fanon and Nana Malcolm X said, we'll become new people in the process and practice of struggling against the old world, right? We heal ourselves in struggle. That's if you read Nana Feno, that's what he says. It's in the midst of the struggle that we not only change the world, but we change ourselves, so that the end of colonialism is one thing, but the end of the colonized person is another. So that real freedom is not only the end of colonialism, it's the end of the colonized person. That's
So I want to bring
we're
what you're saying right now home to the issue of reparations, because we're talking about the decolonizing our minds. We're talking about the infusion of culture. So what can we and should, as Black reparations activists, what can we do to ensure that the movement is not redefined, that the movement is not sold out? You know,
well, appreciate what
I mean, you know, how can we sustain and this movement that we're in right now? You're in the belly of the beast right now, not just in the United States, but in California, where the first state to hold historic hearings on reparations. There was a lot of confusion going on. So I'm just saying,
right. That's right.
We decolonize our minds so we can be victorious.
That's right. So it just seems to me that if you're going to be serious about this, we've got to see reparations as an inclusive project. And those people who are most conscious have got to come together. And what happens, as you know, Attorney Nkechi, you know that one of the most difficult groups to organize was Black nationalists and the people who should know these things. And one of the things I used to always say, I've always accepted in Cobra as the main body. But guess what? They've got to take a common stand. They've got to bring in more people, and they've got to subscribe to a basic program, like when I was just talking about, right? So that all of us know. Then you get into the process of what? Education, mobilization, organization, and confrontation. Stop believing we already know. We don't already know. Practice the Nguzo Saba. Let's just start about that. This is a value system that unites Africans all over the world, on every continent in the world, by millions, in a way no other holiday, no other philosophy does. Rescue me if I'm wrong. That's right. So I think that we have to admit that we have to have a core value system that we all subscribe to. And we can practice it in similar and different ways, but we have to have something, some fundamental statement that all of us agree on. And we've got to solve those fundamental factors I talked about, how we approach it. We've got to create this dialogue, both communal and public. We've got to, in fact, insist on and push for acknowledgement of our injuries, and those three fundamental injuries: the Holocaust of enslavement, the savagery of segregation, systemic racism ongoing. We've got to be able to talk that, to say that, to put it in our documents. It's just everybody, whatever when people feel. So, but in Cobra has the capacity, the history, you know, the legacy. We want to honor Queen Mother Moore. We want to honor Queen Mother Dorothy. We want to honor
Joanne Watson.
Dr. Imadi. What were we going to say?
And Joanne Watson. Queen Mother Joanne Watson.
Yes, Asante for and Zoe Watson. We got to do that. We've got to do all this. We got to honor them. How? By trying to live the legacy they left us. If we don't live the legacy the ancestors left us, who are we? How do we know ourselves? How do we know ourselves? Right? How do we confront ourselves if we don't try as best we can to live the excellence legacies that they left us? So that's what I would like for us to see. The European funds the people that want to break up reparations, right? And want to deny it. So we have to fund ourselves, and we have to agree on the minimum. We got to stop just being, remember I always say that our struggle has always been two things, Attorney Nkechi: the struggle to be ourselves and to free ourselves. To be African without penalty, punishment, or oppression. And without questioning, are we really African? And are using tertiary and secondary identities to erase African, right? We got to quit all that. We have to free ourselves. But we know we can't really free ourselves unless we be ourselves. But we can't fully be ourselves until we fully free ourselves. So it's always intertwined and inseparable, this struggle. So being ourselves means being rooted in African values, thinking collectively. We always say that. There's not a nationalist not a black-minded person who, that don't say we need unity. That's why it's the first principle in the Nguzo Saba, right? But what kind of unity? Operational unity, not total unity. We can't, there's no need for
without
total
uniformity, yes.
Nobody has total unity. Not a nation in the world has total unity. Otherwise, it would die. We need that creative challenge of difference that we have. But the difference shouldn't divide us. It should show the richness of ourselves and how we think. And in that struggle, that good struggle, then we create ourselves. And I want to just close with this and just make this point. We see struggle. When we talk about struggle, we see struggle as one of the defining features of what it means to be human. We struggle to come into being. That's called birth. We struggle to make the most out of being. That's called life. And we struggle not to go out of being. That's called the quest for immortality.
So we have about 6 or 7 more minutes, and I just want to change the topic just for a little bit to show some connections between what's going on here and in certain other parts of the world. So I'm just curious, for Black reparation activists, is there a link between our demand for justice and the demand for justice for the innocent and for the vulnerable in Palestine?
Okay, good. Jabo. And that's one of the things. I'm glad you said Palestine, because sometimes people give the oppressor the same moral status as the oppressed. We can't even have no morality if we think the oppressor has the same moral status as the oppressed. That's like saying the rapist has the same moral status as the rape victim. That's not real. The robber has the same moral status as the robbed. That's not even real. So yes, we have struggled since the 60s. They're saying that we as oppressed people all over the world, and it's usually the people of color all over the world, need to unite. Haji Malcolm saw that. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad saw that. Anna Julia Cooper saw that early, and she said, we take our stand on the unity of humanity. We take our stand on the solidarity of humanity, the oneness of life, and the unnaturalness and injustice of all forms of favoritism, whether they are sex, race, country, or condition, right? And so we've always been a vanguard for the oppressed. We are key people in a key country, Attorney Nkechi. We are key people in a key country. We are more vanguard. And we have fought and won struggles that not only benefited us, but actually expanded the realm of freedom in this country and indeed the world. That is why all the marginalized groups, I can't think of one marginalized group, right, that has not borrowed our moral vocabulary and our moral vision, built on it, and made their case for being free. Whether we talk about other people of color, whether we talk about women, or we talk about gays, or we talk about senior citizens, or we talk about the disabled, whether we talk about people from the Arab Spring, for example, who sang our songs and brought up more vocabulary, the people in China and the Democratic War, the Eastern European freedom struggle, the Palestinian struggle, they've all pointed to us as a moral and social vanguard, as a struggle, human liberation struggle to emulate. And so we have to take ourselves seriously. I remember what Dr. Martin Luther King said the first time he took leadership in the Montgomery Improvement Association and became then international witness for us as a people. He said, let us so struggle that years from now, historians will have to say, there lived a great people, a Black people who through their struggle injected a new meaning and morality in the veins of civilization. This is our challenge and overwhelming responsibility. And I believe that we have to speak truth. The Hosea, sacred text of ancient Egypt, says to us, we're morally obligated to bear witness to truth and to set the scales of justice in their proper place among those who have no voice, those in this country and those in the world, those who have no voice, the voiceless, the devalued, the disempowered, right? The different and the vulnerable and the oppressed. We have to speak because we speak for a voice of freedom and justice and goodness in the world. One last point. We introduced before anybody the concept that humans were in the image of God, that they were bearers of dignity and divinity. We argued that. We introduced first the concept of human dignity and inherent worthiness, right? And inherent worthiness you're born with. Nobody gives it to you. Inherent worthiness that has three characteristics. It's transcendent of all social and biological categories: race, class, gender, sexuality, age, ability, etc. Second, it's equal in all. There's no superior, inferior people, no chosen. We're all chosen, the Odu say. And we're chosen not over and against anyone, but chosen with everyone to do what? Bring good in the world. And finally, that dignity is also inalienable. Nobody can take it from you. You can't even give it away because you're born with it as part of what it means to be human. And we struggle to create space so that dignity, that oneness and goodness of human persons, and especially our African people, that they can flourish and develop and come into the fullness of themselves. And the two principles this: always struggle for African and human good and the well-being of the world and all in it.
Always struggle for good. Thank you so very much. I just want to summarize some of what I heard you say in these last just few minutes, that ethics of reparations and resistance, engaging the concept, the commitment, and the struggle. Thank you for your many, many, many decades of leadership. You're bringing about the studies and information from all over the world, from ancient Egypt to the Ifa in Western Africa, and all the way down to Kwanzaa and everything that we're doing here. Again, thank you for being part of this struggle. Thank you for lifting up our ancestors, such as Dr. Imari Abubakari Obadeli, and all the others that you have lifted up. Brother Randall Robinson, who
Yes.
wrote books on reparations.
Yes.
As well, and for your unwavering commitment to the struggle of African people wherever we may be in the world. Again, Dr. Maulana Karenga, thank you. This has been the 62nd episode of Human Rights and Justice with your host, me, Nkechi Taifa. We want to thank all of those who are listening on WPFW FM Pacifica Radio or its archives. Thank you to our engineer, Deontay Paleta. And if you're listening via podcast, shout out to Human Rights and Justice podcast partners. And you can view this broadcast and all Human Rights and Justice on the Nkechi Taifa YouTube channel. Yes, please subscribe, as well as my website, nkechitaifa.org. So all I want you to do is just get up and stand up for what? For human rights and justice.
Get up, stand up.